Sarah Jenkins walked through the bright hallways of Atlanta Memorial Hospital, her white coat swishing with each step. At 32 years old, she was one of the most respected physical therapists in the facility. Her black hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her warm brown eyes carried the kind of gentleness that made patients feel at ease right away. It was a regular Tuesday morning in March when everything changed. Sarah was checking her schedule for the day when her colleague, Dr. Lisa Chen, rushed up to her with an urgent look on her face. "Sarah, I need a huge favor," Lisa said, slightly out of breath. "I have a new patient, but I'm being called into an emergency consultation. Could you handle his initial assessment?" Sarah nodded without hesitation. That was just the kind of person she was, always ready to help. Of course. What's the case? Patient's name is Marcus Thompson, 35 years old. He had a rock climbing accident 8 months ago. He's been through initial rehabilitation at another hospital but needs continued therapy, Lisa explained, handing over the file. As Sarah walked to room 407, she quickly read through Marcus's medical history. The accident had left him with partial paralysis in his lower body, and he was currently wheelchair-bound. But what caught her attention were the notes about his determination during previous therapy sessions. When she entered the room, she saw a man sitting in a wheelchair near the window. He had broad shoulders, sandy brown hair, and wore a blue button-down shirt that brought out his eyes. What struck Sarah most wasn't his wheelchair. It was the way he was completely absorbed in working on a laptop, his fingers flying over the keys. "Mr. Thompson," Sarah called out softly. Marcus looked up, and a friendly smile spread across his face. "Just Marcus, please. Mr. Thompson makes me feel like my dad." His voice was warm and carried a hint of humor. Sarah introduced herself and explained about Dr. Chen's emergency. As she began the assessment, she noticed something different about Marcus. Unlike many patients who saw their disability as a barrier, he spoke about his condition with remarkable openness. "I'm a software engineer," he explained while Sarah checked his range of motion. "The accident was tough, but you know what's funny? I can still code just as well from this chair. My brain works fine, it's just my legs that need a pep talk." His positive attitude was infectious. Sarah found herself laughing at his jokes and admiring his perspective. During the strength tests, Marcus told her about the app he was developing. Software to help other people with disabilities navigate public spaces more easily. "The world isn't always built for wheels," he said, gesturing to his chair. "But instead of complaining, I decided to do something about it." As the session progressed, Sarah noticed little things about Marcus that weren't in his medical file. The way his eyes lit up when he talked about his work. How he used humor to put others at ease. The gentle way he spoke about his family, especially his younger sister who had moved in to help him after the accident. Near the end of the session, while discussing his therapy schedule, Marcus surprised Sarah with a question. "Do you like coffee?" he asked suddenly. Sarah blinked, caught off guard. "Yes, I do. There's a great cafe in the hospital lobby. Their lattes are actually decent, which is rare for hospital coffee," Marcus said. "Maybe we could grab one sometime, to discuss my therapy progress." For a moment, Sarah hesitated. She had a strict policy about maintaining professional boundaries with patients. But something about Marcus felt different. His question wasn't flirtatious or inappropriate. It felt genuine, like someone simply wanting to have a conversation. "That would be nice," she found herself saying, "but let's keep it professional." Marcus nodded, understanding the boundary she was setting. Of course, professional coffee and professional conversation about professional therapy. As Sarah left room 407 that day, she didn't realize that this was the beginning of something extraordinary. She didn't know that this initial meeting would lead to a love story that would challenge perceptions, break barriers, and ultimately change both their lives forever. What she did know was that for the first time in a long while, she was looking forward to her next therapy session in a way that felt different. Something about Marcus Thompson had caught her attention, and deep down, she knew this wasn't going to be just another patient-therapist relationship. 3 months passed since Sarah and Marcus's first meeting at the hospital. Their professional coffee chats had slowly turned into longer conversations, and both of them knew something special was growing between them. But life was about to remind them that love wasn't always simple. One Sunday afternoon, Sarah sat in her mother's kitchen in South Atlanta. The smell of cornbread and collard greens filled the air as her mother, Diana Jenkins stirred a pot of black-eyed peas. Sarah had finally decided to tell her mother about Marcus. "Mama, I need to tell you something," Sarah said, her hands wrapped around a cup of sweet tea. "I've been seeing someone." Diana's face brightened. "Baby, that's wonderful. Tell me about him. Is he a doctor at the hospital?" Sarah took a deep breath. "His name is Marcus. He's a software engineer, and he's really wonderful, Mama. He's kind, smart, and makes me laugh." She paused before adding, "He's white, and he uses a wheelchair." The wooden spoon in Diana's hand stopped moving. She turned slowly to face her daughter. "Sarah Michelle Jenkins, are you telling me you're dating a disabled white man?" "Mama, I know it's not what you expected." "Child, life is already hard enough for a black woman in this world," Diana interrupted. "Why would you choose to make it even harder for yourself?" Sarah stood up, her voice firm but respectful. "I didn't choose to fall in love with Marcus, Mama. It just happened. And his disability doesn't make him any less of a man." Meanwhile, across town in Buckhead, Marcus was having his own difficult conversation. His younger sister Rachel sat on his apartment couch, her face filled with concern. "Marcus, are you sure about this?" Rachel asked. "Dating your physical therapist? A black woman? What will Mom and Dad say?" Marcus wheeled himself closer to his sister. "They'll say what they always say, that they want me to be happy. And Sarah makes me happy, Ratch. Happier than I've been since the accident." "But have you thought about the future?" Rachel pressed. "Marriage? Kids? Taking care of you?" "Sarah doesn't take care of me," Marcus replied firmly. "We take care of each other, and yes, I've thought about the future. I think about it every time I see her smile." The next few weeks tested both Sarah and Marcus. They faced stares when they went out together. Some people looking at Marcus's wheelchair, others at their interracial relationship. But instead of letting it bother them, they found ways to handle it with grace and sometimes even humor. At a restaurant one evening, when an elderly woman kept staring at them, Marcus loudly told Sarah, "You know what's really shocking? That someone as beautiful as you would date the software engineer." His comment made the woman blush and look away, while Sarah burst out laughing. Sarah's mother slowly began to change her mind when Marcus came over for Sunday dinner. She watched how he helped Sarah with the dishes, expertly maneuvering his wheelchair in her small kitchen. She saw how his eyes followed her daughter with pure love, and how Sarah's whole face lit up when he spoke. Marcus's family took longer to come around. His parents, living in Boston, had only met Sarah through video calls. But during one call, when Sarah expertly helped Marcus when his wheelchair got stuck, showing both strength and tenderness, his mother's attitude softened. "She really loves you, doesn't she?" his mother asked later. "Yes, Mom, she does," Marcus replied. "And I love her." 6 months into their relationship, Sarah and Marcus had dinner at the small cafe where they'd had their first professional coffee. As they sat together, they realized how far they'd come. The stares from other people didn't matter anymore. Their families were slowly accepting their relationship. Most importantly, they had each other. "You know," Marcus said, reaching across the table to hold Sarah's hand, "when I had my accident, I thought my life was over. But now I realize it was just beginning. It was leading me to you." Sarah squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with tears. "We got this," she said, using the phrase they'd often repeated during his therapy sessions. "Yeah." Marcus smiled. "We got this." What they didn't know then was that their biggest challenges and greatest joys were still ahead of them. But together, they were ready to face whatever came their way. Marcus sat in his apartment, staring at his computer screen while his hands shook slightly. After dating Sarah for a year, he knew she was the one. Now, he wanted to create the perfect proposal, something that would show her just how special she was. As a software engineer, he knew he could use his skills to make this moment unforgettable. For weeks, Marcus had been secretly working with his friend David, who managed the Georgia Aquarium. Together, they planned something that had never been done before. Marcus spent late nights coding, testing, and making sure everything would work perfectly. Sarah noticed that Marcus seemed distracted lately. When she asked if everything was okay, he just smiled and said he was busy with a big project at work. She believed him, but sometimes caught him quickly closing his laptop when she entered the room. One Saturday morning, Marcus called Sarah. "Hey beautiful, How about we visit the aquarium today? David gave me free passes, and I heard they have some new exhibits. Sounds perfect, Sarah said. She loved how Marcus always planned fun activities that they could enjoy together, wheelchair and all. When they arrived at the aquarium, David met them at the entrance. He gave Marcus a quick wink that Sarah didn't notice. As they moved through the exhibits, Sarah noticed Marcus seemed nervous, constantly checking his phone. "Are you sure everything's okay?" she asked again. "Never better," Marcus replied, squeezing her hand. "Let's head to the Ocean Voyager tunnel next." The Ocean Voyager was Sarah's favorite part of the aquarium. It was a long tunnel with thick glass walls, where visitors could watch huge fish, manta rays, and even whale sharks swim overhead and around them. As they entered the tunnel, Marcus pressed something on his phone. Suddenly, all the digital screens in the tunnel changed. Instead of showing information about sea creatures, they began displaying photos of Sarah and Marcus from throughout their relationship. Sarah gasped, "Marcus, what's happening?" The first screen showed their hospital coffee dates. The next displayed their first real date at the park. Then came pictures from family dinners, holiday celebrations, and quiet moments together. With each image, soft music played through the tunnel's speakers. Other visitors stopped to watch, smiling as they realized what was happening. The final screen lit up with a video Marcus had recorded. In it, he spoke directly to Sarah. "Sarah Jenkins, you came into my life when I thought I had lost everything. You saw past my wheelchair and straight into my heart. You never treated me like I was broken. Instead, you showed me that love has no barriers." Sarah's hands covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. She turned to find Marcus holding a small blue box in his hands. He had positioned his wheelchair right under a swimming whale shark, making the moment even more magical. "I may not be able to get down on one knee," Marcus said, his voice filled with emotion, "but I can promise to love you with all my heart for the rest of my life." He opened the box, revealing a beautiful diamond ring. "Sarah Jenkins, will you marry me?" The entire tunnel fell silent. The only sounds were the soft bubbling of water and Sarah's happy sobs. She reached for Marcus's hands, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." As she leaned down to kiss him, the tunnel erupted in cheers and applause. Even the aquarium staff were wiping away tears. David appeared with champagne, and other visitors came forward to congratulate them. "How did you do all this?" Sarah asked, admiring her ring while still crying happy tears. Marcus grinned. "I'm not just a pretty face in a wheelchair, you know. I wrote the program for the screens myself. Took me weeks to get it perfect." Sarah laughed and kissed him again. "You're amazing, Marcus Thompson." As they continued through the aquarium, now as an engaged couple, Sarah couldn't stop smiling. She had gone to work one day expecting a normal therapy session, and instead found the love of her life. Now they were planning a wedding. What Sarah didn't know was that Marcus had another surprise planned for their wedding day, one that would shock not just her, but everyone they knew. But for now, he kept that secret locked safely away, enjoying the joy of this perfect moment with his future wife. Planning a wedding wasn't easy, but planning one that perfectly blended two cultures while ensuring everything was wheelchair accessible was even harder. Sarah and Marcus sat in their favorite coffee shop, surrounded by wedding magazines and their laptops showing venue options. "What about the Golden Gardens Hotel?" Sarah asked, scrolling through pictures. "They have beautiful gardens for the ceremony." Marcus wheeled closer to look at the screen. "The gardens look amazing, but are there ramps? I don't want to get stuck in the grass halfway down the aisle." He laughed, but Sarah could hear the worry in his voice. Sarah's mother, Diana, had completely changed her attitude since the engagement. She now spent hours helping them plan, bringing her famous sweet tea to their planning sessions. Today, she arrived at the coffee shop carrying a big folder of ideas. "I've been thinking about the ceremony," Diana said, sitting down. "We need to blend both families' traditions. Sarah, baby, I want you to have your grandmother's blessing ceremony. We should include Jewish traditions too, for Marcus's family." Marcus smiled warmly at his future mother-in-law. "My mom will love that, Diana. She's been worried our wedding wouldn't feel Jewish enough." They decided to visit the top 3 venues on their list. The first 2 were beautiful but had problems. One had stairs everywhere, and the other's elevator was too small for Marcus's wheelchair. But the third venue, the Metropolitan Garden, was perfect. "Look at this," Sarah exclaimed excitedly. The venue had smooth, wide pathways through its gardens, elegant ramps alongside every set of stairs, and plenty of space for their 200 guests. The owner, Mrs. Chen, had experience with wheelchair-accessible weddings. "My son uses a wheelchair too," Mrs. Chen explained, showing them around. "I made sure this place could be enjoyed by everyone." As they planned the ceremony, Marcus had a special request. "I want to do our first dance in my wheelchair," he said, "but I want it to be amazing." Sarah's eyes lit up. "We could take dance lessons. I've heard there are instructors who specialize in wheelchair dancing." They found Miss Rodriguez, a dance instructor who taught wheelchair ballroom dancing. During their first lesson, she showed them how Marcus could spin Sarah while in his wheelchair, how they could move together smoothly, and even how to do lifts safely. "People think wheelchair dancing isn't romantic," Miss Rodriguez said. "We're going to prove them wrong." Meanwhile, Marcus was keeping another secret. 3 times a week, when Sarah thought he was at work late, he was actually at a special physical therapy center. But he made sure no one knew about these sessions, not even Sarah. The wedding was coming together beautifully. They chose purple and silver for their colors, representing royalty and strength. Sarah found a dress that made her mother cry happy tears, and Marcus ordered a custom-made suit that would look perfect whether he was sitting or standing. Diana and Marcus's mother, Rebecca, surprised everyone by becoming close friends. They spent hours planning the menu, combining soul food with traditional Jewish dishes. There would be both brisket and fried chicken, matzo ball soup and collard greens, challah bread and cornbread. One evening, while they were tasting wedding cakes, Sarah noticed Marcus looking tired. "Are you okay?" she asked. "You've been working so hard lately." Marcus squeezed her hand. "I'm perfect. Just excited about our big day." He didn't tell her about the hours of secret therapy, the pain, or the hope that kept him going. He wanted his surprise to be perfect. With 1 month left until the wedding, everything was falling into place. The invitations were sent, showing a beautiful design of 2 hands joined together, one black, one white, with wheels and stars in the background, symbolizing their unique love story. Sarah and Marcus had proved that love knew no boundaries. Their wedding would show the world that differences in race or physical ability couldn't stop true love. But nobody, especially not Sarah, could guess the amazing surprise that Marcus was planning for their special day. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect spring weather. Sunlight streamed through the windows of the Metropolitan Gardens bridal suite, where Sarah sat in front of a large mirror. Her mother Diana stood behind her, carefully placing her grandmother's pearl pins in her hair. "You look like an angel, baby," Diana whispered, trying not to cry and ruin her makeup. Sarah's wedding dress was stunning, an ivory gown with delicate lace sleeves and a sweetheart neckline. The dress had been carefully chosen to look beautiful whether she was standing or sitting beside Marcus in his wheelchair. In another room, Marcus was getting ready with his best friend David and his father, Richard. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted his silver tie. The custom-made suit fit perfectly, and his wheels had been polished until they shone. "Son," Richard said, placing a hand on Marcus's shoulder, "I've never seen you look happier." He paused, then added, "Are you sure about the surprise?" Marcus nodded firmly. "I've been practicing for months, Dad. I can do this." Outside, the garden was transformed into a magical setting. 200 chairs were arranged in a smooth semicircle, with wide aisles for easy wheelchair access. A beautiful chuppah stood at the front, decorated with purple and white flowers. The traditional Jewish wedding canopy had been built slightly lower than usual, perfect for Marcus's height in his wheelchair. The guests began arriving, filling the garden with color and excitement. On Sarah's side, her large extended family came dressed in their Sunday best, many wearing traditional African prints mixed with modern styles. Marcus's Jewish relatives arrived wearing kippot, many of them seeing their first African-American wedding ceremony. At exactly 2 p.m., the music began. The gospel choir from Sarah's church started singing at last as the wedding party made their entrance. The bridesmaids wore flowing purple dresses, while the groomsmen matched in gray suits with purple ties. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. Marcus wheeled himself down the aisle first, moving smoothly along the path they had practiced so many times. His wheelchair had been decorated with small, elegant flowers that matched the chuppah. He took his place under the canopy, turning to watch for his bride. The music changed to a beautiful blend of gospel and traditional Jewish wedding music. The guests stood as Sarah appeared at the end of the aisle with her father, James. She looked radiant, her dark skin glowing against the ivory dress, her smile brighter than the sun. As Sarah walked toward him, Marcus felt tears in his eyes. He remembered their first meeting at the hospital, their coffee dates, the proposal at the aquarium. Every moment had led to this. Sarah's father kissed her cheek before placing her hand in Marcus's. The ceremony was a perfect blend of both their traditions. Their friend Rabbi Cohen and Sarah's uncle, Reverend Thomas, performed the ceremony together. They signed both the ketubah and a traditional marriage certificate. Sarah's grandmother performed the African blessing ceremony, while Marcus's parents held the chuppah poles. When it was time for the ring exchange, Marcus pulled out his grandmother's ring, which had survived the Holocaust. "Sarah," he said, his voice strong and clear, "with this ring, I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for all the days of my life." He slipped the ring onto her finger. Sarah took her ring from Marcus, a custom design that incorporated African tribal patterns. "Marcus," she said through happy tears, "with this ring, I promise to love you, support you, and stand by you forever." She placed the ring on his finger. Rabbi Cohen wrapped them in his talit prayer shawl while Reverend Thomas led a prayer. Then came the traditional breaking of the glass, which Marcus managed perfectly from his wheelchair. Mazel Tov, the crowd shouted, while Sarah's family added joyful ululations to the celebration. As the newlyweds made their way back down the aisle, now husband and wife, their guests threw rose petals and blew bubbles. But what no one knew was that the biggest surprise of the day was still to come. During the reception, Marcus would show everyone, especially Sarah, something amazing that he had been working on for months. The Metropolitan Gardens grand ballroom sparkled with purple and silver decorations. Round tables filled the room, each one covered in white cloth and centered with tall vases of fresh flowers. The dance floor gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and a live band was setting up their instruments on stage. Sarah and Marcus waited outside the ballroom doors for their grand entrance. Sarah had changed into her reception dress, a simpler but equally beautiful gown that would allow her to dance more easily. She noticed Marcus seemed nervous, his hands fidgeting with his wheel rims. "Are you okay, honey?" she asked, touching his shoulder. Marcus smiled up at her, "Just excited to show everyone our first dance." But inside, his heart was racing. In just a few hours, he would reveal his big surprise. The DJ's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome for the first time Mr. and Mrs. Marcus and Sarah Thompson." The doors opened, and they entered to wild applause. Marcus had practiced this entrance for weeks. He spun his wheelchair in a smooth circle while holding Sarah's hand, making her twirl beside him. Their guests cheered even louder at this unexpected move. They made their way to the head table, where both their families waited. Diana and Rebecca, their mothers, sat together, already sharing tissues and wiping happy tears. The tables were arranged so that Marcus could easily move between them in his wheelchair. The food service began, and everyone marveled at the unique menu. Guests could choose between traditional Jewish brisket and southern fried chicken, or try both. The sides included both matzo ball soup and collard greens, bringing together both families' favorites. Even the bread basket had both challah and cornbread. Sarah's young cousin Maya came up to their table. "Cousin Sarah, you look like a princess," she said, then turned to Marcus. "And your wheelchair looks like a prince's chariot with all the flowers." Marcus laughed and showed Maya how to spin one of his wheels. "Want to learn a wheelchair dance move?" he asked. Maya nodded excitedly, and Marcus taught her how to do a simple spin while holding the wheel. The speeches began with David, Marcus's best man. When Marcus had his accident, David said he thought his life was over. But then he met Sarah, and she showed him that life was just beginning. They proved that love has no limitations. Sarah's maid of honor, her sister Rachel, spoke next. "At first, I worried about my sister dating a guy in a wheelchair," she admitted. "But Marcus showed us all that his wheelchair doesn't define him. His heart, his mind, and his love for Sarah do." The couple's first dance was approaching, and Marcus excused himself to freshen up. He wheeled into a private room where his physical therapist and doctor waited. They had been secretly attending the wedding, ready for what was about to happen. "Are you ready?" the doctor asked, helping Marcus with some final preparations. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," Marcus replied. Back in the ballroom, Sarah chatted with guests, unaware of what was coming. Her father pulled her aside for a moment. "Baby girl," he said, "I was wrong about Marcus at first. That man loves you more than life itself." Sarah hugged her father. "I know, Daddy. He's amazing." The DJ announced it was time for the first dance. The lights dimmed, and soft music began to play. Sarah looked around for Marcus but didn't see him. "Where's Marcus?" she asked David. David smiled mysteriously. "He'll be here in a moment." The band began playing at last, the same song from their ceremony. The ballroom doors opened, and Marcus appeared in his wheelchair. He looked different somehow, more determined. Sarah noticed he had removed the decorative flowers from his chair, but she didn't understand why. What happened next would leave every guest speechless and bring Sarah to tears of joy. Marcus Thompson was about to give his new wife the surprise of her life. The ballroom fell silent as Marcus wheeled to the center of the dance floor. Sarah stood nearby, expecting their planned wheelchair dance to begin. What she didn't know was that for the past 10 months, Marcus had been secretly attending intensive physical therapy sessions 4 times a week. "Sarah," Marcus said into the microphone someone handed him, "from the day you became my physical therapist, you believed in me. You never saw my wheelchair as a limitation. Today, I want to show you something I've been working on since the day I decided to propose." Sarah noticed 2 people approach Marcus from the side, a man and a woman she didn't recognize. Later, she would learn they were Marcus's secret physical therapy team. They stood on either side of his wheelchair, and Marcus handed the microphone to David. Marcus took a deep breath and placed his hands on the armrests of his wheelchair. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth as she realized what was about to happen. Slowly, with tremendous effort and determination, Marcus began to push himself up from his wheelchair. His therapist stayed close but didn't touch him. This was all Marcus. His legs shook with the effort, but he kept going. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she watched her husband, who she had only ever known in a wheelchair, gradually rise to his feet. The room erupted in gasps and cries of amazement. Diana grabbed Rebecca's hand, both mothers sobbing with joy. Sarah's father held on to his wife, tears in his eyes as he watched his son-in-law stand for the first time. Marcus now stood upright, supported by 2 specially designed leg braces hidden under his pants. They weren't permanent. He would still need his wheelchair most of the time, but for this moment, for this dance, he could stand and take a few steps. "Sarah," Marcus called out, his voice shaking with emotion, "may I have this dance?" Sarah ran to him, tears flowing freely down her face. "How?" she whispered as she reached him. "How did you do this?" With a lot of help, determination, and the thought of this moment, Marcus said softly, "I wanted to look into your eyes while we danced at our wedding." The band began playing "What a Wonderful World," the song they had chosen months ago. Marcus and Sarah swayed together, turning slowly in a small circle. Marcus couldn't move much, but it didn't matter. They were dancing, standing together, looking into each other's eyes. Guests wiped away tears as they watched. Many filmed the moment on their phones, knowing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Maya, Sarah's young cousin, tugged on her mother's dress and whispered, "Mommy, look. Uncle Marcus is magic." After a few minutes, Marcus's therapist brought his wheelchair closer. "I can't stay up much longer," he whispered to Sarah, "but I wanted to give you this moment." Sarah helped him back into his wheelchair, then sat in his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You amazing, wonderful man," she said through happy tears. "I fall in love with you more every day." The crowd broke into applause and cheers. Marcus's father walked over and hugged them both, crying openly. "Son, I've never been prouder," he said. Sarah's mother made her way through the crowd. "Marcus Thompson," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "you are truly a blessing to our family." As the evening continued, guests came up one by one to congratulate them. Marcus explained that while he had made incredible progress, he would still use his wheelchair most of the time. The braces and therapy allowed him to stand for short periods, but they weren't a complete cure. "But that's okay," he told everyone. "My wheelchair is part of who I am. I just wanted to share this special moment with my wife." Later that night, as they swayed together on the dance floor. Marcus back in his wheelchair with Sarah in his lap. Sarah whispered, "Thank you for the most magical surprise I could have ever imagined." Marcus kissed her softly. "Thank you for showing me that love knows no boundaries. You make everything possible." 1 month after their magical wedding, Sarah and Marcus's story went viral. Someone had posted their wedding dance video online, and within days, millions of people around the world had watched the moment Marcus stood up to dance with his bride. The newlyweds woke up one morning to find their phones buzzing with messages. News channels wanted interviews, and social media was filled with their story. People called it a modern fairy tale, the physical therapist who fell in love with her patient, and the surprise that touched hearts worldwide. "Should we do the interviews?" Sarah asked Marcus over breakfast in their new apartment. The space had been specially designed to be wheelchair-friendly, with wide doorways and lowered countertops in the kitchen. Marcus thought for a moment while buttering his toast. "Maybe we could use this attention to help others," he said. "Show people that love doesn't see disabilities or color, just sees the heart." They chose to do one main interview with a respected TV host. The interviewer, Maria Chen, came to their home to make Marcus more comfortable. As cameras rolled, they shared their full story. "The wheelchair was never an issue for me," Sarah explained, holding Marcus's hand. "I fell in love with his smile, his kindness, and his brilliant mind." Marcus added, "And I fell in love with her spirit. Sarah never saw me as someone to pity. She saw me as a whole person who just happened to use a wheelchair." The interview showed clips from their wedding, including the moment Marcus stood up. They explained that while Marcus still used his wheelchair daily, his therapy continued. He could now stand for short periods during special occasions. "It's not about trying to overcome the wheelchair," Marcus explained to Maria. "It's about living life to the fullest, whatever that means for each person." Their story inspired others. Soon, Sarah and Marcus started receiving letters and emails from people around the world. Some came from interracial couples who faced family opposition. Others came from people with disabilities who feared they would never find love. 3 months after the wedding, they started a foundation called Love Without Limits. The organization helped fund wheelchair dance classes, supported interracial couples facing challenges, and provided resources for disabled individuals seeking to achieve their dreams. Sarah continued her work as a physical therapist, but now she specialized in helping patients find joy in movement, whether they could walk or not. She often told her patients about Marcus, showing them that a full life was possible regardless of their mobility. Marcus's app for helping wheelchair users navigate public spaces became a huge success. He added new features based on suggestions from their growing community. The app now helped thousands of people find accessible restaurants, stores, and venues. Their families grew even closer. Every Sunday, they'd alternated between soul food dinner at Sarah's parents' house and traditional Jewish meals at Marcus's family home. Their mothers became best friends, often shopping together and sharing recipes. 6 months after their wedding, Sarah and Marcus sat in their favorite coffee shop, the same one where they'd had their first professional coffee date. A young woman in a wheelchair approached them shyly. "I saw your wedding video," she said. "It gave me hope. I've been afraid to date since my accident, but your story showed me that true love is possible." Marcus smiled warmly. "Love finds you when you least expect it," he said, winking at Sarah. "Sometimes it's just waiting in a hospital therapy room." That evening, as they relaxed at home, Sarah noticed Marcus looking thoughtful. "What's on your mind?" she asked. "I was just thinking," he said, pulling her onto his lap in the wheelchair. "Our story isn't really about me standing up at our wedding. It's about two people who stood up to the world's expectations and chose love instead." Sarah kissed him softly. "And we'll keep standing up, whether on our feet or on wheels, for what we believe in." Their story continued to inspire others, proving that true love knows no boundaries. Marcus and Sarah Thompson showed the world that sometimes the biggest limitations aren't physical, they're the ones we place in our minds. And with love, faith, and determination, those limitations can be overcome, one step or wheel at a time.